Daniel Harper had never imagined that the hardest battle of his life would begin after he came home from the military. During his years of service, he had learned to stay calm under pressure, make difficult decisions, and protect the people beside him. But nothing had prepared him for raising his daughter alone after losing his wife, Sarah, to cancer 3 years earlier. Since then, every day had revolved around 9-year-old Lily. Daniel woke up early to make breakfast, packed her school lunch, worked long hours as a maintenance supervisor, and still found time to help with homework before bed. Their life wasn't luxurious, but it was filled with love, trust, and routines that gave them comfort. One of those routines was dinner every Friday night at a small neighborhood diner. The place had faded booths, old photographs on the walls, and a welcoming atmosphere that reminded Daniel of simpler times. The staff knew them by name, and Lily always looked forward to ordering the same grilled cheese sandwich with tomato soup. As they settled into their usual booth near the window, the rain began falling outside, turning the glass into a blur of tiny droplets. The warm smell of fresh coffee and baked bread filled the room while quiet conversations floated through the diner. Their regular waitress, Emily, greeted them with a genuine smile. "Good evening, Daniel. Hi, Lily, the usual?" "You know us too well," Daniel replied with a small laugh. Emily smiled before writing down the order. Although she remained cheerful, Daniel noticed the tiredness in her eyes. She moved quickly from table to table without losing her patience, thanking every customer politely, even those who barely acknowledged her. Lily watched her leave. "She always smiles," Lily said softly. Daniel nodded. Sometimes the strongest people are the ones who keep being kind, even when they're carrying burdens you can't see. Just then, the quiet atmosphere changed. The front door opened with force, and 3 well-dressed men entered. The one in front wore an expensive tailored suit and carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to being obeyed. He didn't greet anyone or wait to be seated. Instead, he chose a table in the middle of the diner and impatiently tapped his fingers against it. When Emily approached with a polite smile to take his order, the man frowned before she had even spoken more than a few words, and several nearby customers instinctively looked in their direction, sensing that the peaceful evening was about to take an unpleasant turn. Emily took a slow breath and opened her notepad. "Good evening, sir. May I take your order?" The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked her up and down with obvious disrespect before leaning back in his chair. "I've been waiting for almost 2 minutes," he said loudly. "Is this really the level of service this place offers?" Emily remained composed. "I'm sorry for the wait. We were helping another customer. What would you like to order?" One of the men sitting with him chuckled. "At least she knows how to apologize." The businessman smirked, clearly enjoying the attention. He listed several changes to his order, speaking so quickly that Emily had to ask him to repeat one item. His expression hardened. "Are you not listening, or are you simply not smart enough to write it down?" The conversation in the diner grew quieter. A few customers glanced toward the table but quickly looked away, unwilling to get involved. "I'm sorry," Emily said calmly. "I just want to make sure your order is correct." She finished writing and turned to leave when the man deliberately pushed his water glass toward the edge of the table. It tipped over, sending water across the tabletop and onto the floor. He immediately pointed at the spill. "Unbelievable," he snapped. "Now look what you've done." Emily looked surprised but didn't argue. She reached for a towel and quietly began cleaning the mess. Watching her apologize for something she hadn't caused made Lily frown. "Dad," she whispered, "it wasn't her fault." Daniel had seen situations like this before. Not on a battlefield, but in everyday life, where people used power, money, or status to humiliate someone they believed couldn't fight back. He placed his napkin on the table and answered softly, "No, it wasn't." As Emily stood up after cleaning the floor, the businessman reached out and grabbed her wrist to stop her from walking away. "I wasn't finished talking to you," he said sharply. The sudden silence that filled the diner felt heavier than the rain outside. Emily tried to pull her hand back without making a scene. "Sir," she said steadily, "please let go." Daniel slowly rose from his chair. Years of military service had taught him that real courage wasn't about looking for conflict. It was about knowing exactly when silence was no longer the right choice. Daniel walked toward the table without raising his voice or making a dramatic entrance. His movements were calm, the same calm that had helped him stay focused in dangerous situations years earlier. He stopped a few feet away and looked directly at the businessman. "Let her go," he said evenly. The man turned, still holding Emily's wrist. His expression shifted from irritation to amusement. "And who are you supposed to be? Someone asking you to release her?" A faint smile spread across the businessman's face as he finally let go of Emily's wrist. She stepped back immediately, rubbing her hand and trying to hide how shaken she felt. The businessman stood, adjusting the sleeve of his tailored jacket. "This doesn't concern you," he said. "Mind your own business and go back to your table." Daniel didn't move. "It became my business the moment you put your hands on someone who was simply doing her job." A few customers nodded quietly, though none spoke aloud. The restaurant manager hurried over, looking nervous. "Sir, please," the manager said to the businessman. "Let's all calm down." Instead of calming down, the man laughed. "You know who I am?" he asked Daniel. "I own companies that employ hundreds of people. One phone call from me could make life difficult for this restaurant." Daniel listened without reacting. "I've met people with real authority," he replied. "The respectable ones never needed to remind everyone they had it." The words landed harder than Daniel intended. The businessman frowned, clearly unused to being challenged. Lily watched from the booth, her small hands wrapped around her glass of water. She wasn't frightened by her father's calmness. She had seen that expression before whenever he was helping someone or standing up for what he believed was right. Emily quietly thanked Daniel, but he simply gave her a reassuring nod. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "Everyone deserves to be treated with respect." For a moment, the diner fell completely silent. Then an elderly customer near the window spoke up. "He's right." Another customer nodded in agreement. Soon, several voices echoed the same sentiment. The businessman looked around and realized the room had changed. The people who had stayed silent only moments earlier were no longer willing to pretend they hadn't seen what had happened. For the first time that evening, he found himself standing alone. The businessman glanced around the diner, expecting someone to support him. Instead, he found nothing but uneasy faces and quiet disapproval. The confidence that had filled the room when he arrived began to fade. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and tossed several bills onto the table. "This place isn't worth my time," he muttered. Before he could take another step, the diner's front door opened again. A woman in her early 60s entered, dressed simply in a navy coat with no jewelry or signs of wealth. She walked with quiet confidence, her eyes scanning the room until they rested on Emily. "There you are," she said warmly. Emily looked surprised. "Mom, I thought your meeting wasn't until later." The woman smiled and then noticed the tense atmosphere. "What happened?" The restaurant manager hesitated before explaining everything. As he spoke, the woman's expression grew serious. She thanked him, then turned to Daniel. "I appreciate what you did," she said sincerely. "Most people would have looked away." Daniel shook his head. "I only did what I hoped someone would do for my daughter one day." The woman extended her hand. "My name is Margaret Lawson." The businessman froze. His confident expression disappeared the instant he recognized the name. Margaret Lawson wasn't just Emily's mother. She was the founder of one of the country's largest investment groups, a business leader whose companies were worth billions. Emily had chosen to work at the diner on weekends without telling customers who her family was because she wanted to earn her own experience instead of relying on privilege. Margaret looked directly at the businessman. "Wealth should never be confused with character," she said calmly. "My daughter came here to learn humility. It appears you could benefit from the same lesson." Unable to respond, the man quietly gathered his belongings and walked out of the diner without another word. After he left, the room slowly returned to normal. Conversations resumed, and someone began clapping. Within seconds, the entire diner joined in. Emily smiled through grateful tears. Daniel returned to his booth, where Lily hugged him tightly. "Dad," she whispered, "I think being brave is helping people, even when nobody asks you to." Daniel smiled. "That's exactly what being brave means." That night, Lily didn't remember the expensive suit or the billionaire's name. She remembered something far more valuable, that dignity costs nothing, kindness is a choice, and true greatness is measured not by wealth, but by the way a person treats those who can offer nothing in return.